Welcome back to the official Beast Lab. This episode features Deemer Class, a close friend, one of the best lacrosse players in the world, but also one of the best instructors in the world. He runs first class lacrosse. Not only does he teach it, but he also helps with recruiting. Best in Class is quickly becoming one of the premier events on the recruiting circuit. I want to welcome Deemer Class here on the official Beast Lab.
Greg, excited to be here, man. Appreciate your time as always, and excited to see as you kick this off where this thing goes. So really appreciate you having me on as one of the early guests.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. You were one of the first people I reached out to when we came up with this idea. I think one of the things that is so unique is about lacrosse. When I started playing lacrosse when I was in college at Penn State around the 2003, 2004 time, getting into strength and conditioning, you were an outlier. You were like a meathead. And I remember being early years in Major League Lacrosse. If you lifted, it was like total meat stick. Now, you can't get anywhere in our sport without the ability to hit the weight room, also hit the track. So I love hearing how strength and conditioning has shaped some of the guys' philosophies and training. You're a professional lacrosse player. You're at the top of the game in Premier Lacrosse League. So first, what I wanted to do was just kind of get your intro in how you started your training philosophy. Was it in high school? Did you pick it up when you were later in your career, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I've really had a couple guys to thank for how things have progressed in my career. So, starting, freshman year of high school, I started working out with Jay Dyer in Baltimore. Jay, really did a lot for my group of friends and I think my cousin Gavin, who I'll also mention, got us introduced and worked out all through high school, all through college in the off seasons. Jay's the strength coach at Johns Hopkins University. I think runs all of Hopkins sports, USA men's and women's. And so I just felt really fortunate to have him really help me build a foundation for lifting, for running, conditioning. And that was huge. So, Jay really kicked that off. I'd also say, more recently, in 2018, when I went back to full-time lacrosse, my cousin Gavin Class, who's now in Colorado, he was working for Jay. He trained me a lot individually too. Started introducing some different concepts of crawling and original strength, which I always felt like were really unique. And then two other guys, Shannon Brinson up in Rochester and Courtney Green, who I currently train with in Baltimore. Guys that have, I think, taught me a lot. I think really thoughtful about, their craft, but also I think too, like starting to really explore different avenues, within strength, conditioning, movement. And for myself as a skills trainer, sometimes I feel like I'm going in a million directions just because I know what I know, but then I'm seeing different stuff out there and I'm constantly trying to just get better and make sure I'm finding the best ways to, for myself to still train, but also for my athletes, which I think really at the end of the day has really become my passion. So it's exciting.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons that we started this whole thing was OBL was basically supposed to be an idea where athletes can consume this right now. There are attackmen right now that train with you, or maybe they don't, and they understand that Deemer Class is a world-class player, no pun intended, and they want to know exactly what you do in the off season. And I think for a lot of kids that watch us play professional lacrosse, they see what happens on the field, but they don't have an appreciation for all the stuff 99% of the time off the field that correlates to us being able to play at that 0.001% of players. So when you think about, you had mentioned kind of the bodyweight movements. And I think a lot of kids will ask, can you write me a program? And they always want to go to bench press and squat. Can you do a push-up right? Can you do a bodyweight squat right? Can you even lunge without being shaky? So tell me more about the bodyweight stuff, the crawling, et cetera, that you've done with your cousin.
Yeah. So in 2018, I know Gavin was on a big kick with, this concept of original strength. And so we were doing crawling, we were doing like barrel rolls. It was, crawling sideways, forward, backwards, like keeping an object on your back. So it's making you keep like your core tight. I remember those were the first times too, I was doing like kettlebell walks, like upside down kettlebells to like, again, like you got to stabilize that, but also it's learning how to stabilize through your core. And I think like, as I just got smarter in terms of, I think one, being more mindful when I'm training, and two, like always being so curious, like, what am I training for? What am I trying to work on? There were so many exercises, not to any fault of our strength staff at Duke or even my early days with Jay. There were so many exercises where I was just focused on the weight and just putting weight up, where I wasn't actively engaging my core. I wasn't actively engaging different muscles or different back muscles. And I think, again, while, yeah, like there was numbers that were going up, I think, eventually, like, there's going to be times I was probably making myself susceptible to injury, in some capacity, just given, I never thought my core strength and my, back strength or lower back strength was that strong. And I think that's something that, I really started learning like out of college in my early years. And then, ironically, something that has been frustrating to deal with in my career, but I think ultimately is making me a better coach is, I've dealt for 3 years, ultimately culminating in surgery with, a sports hernia injury. I got both sides repaired, lower abdomen, adductor, type stuff. Really common injury in lacrosse, football, any kind of rotational sport. And it ended 2 of my pro seasons. I missed the 2020 bubble. And, thankfully I'm like healthy and coming back from it. But that's something where I'm like, man, like there's a lot of stuff I learned through that rehab process that I wish I had just been paying more attention to in those early days. And I think some stuff that like Gavin was showing me, and even working with Courtney now, and he's constantly trying to, activate different stuff without like just a big focus on how much weight I'm putting up, has been huge.
Yeah, I think there's different modalities, there's different philosophies. You said Gavin was on a kick, and we were actually talking about that with Scotty about how if you're going to continue to be a good strength coach in this world, you have to continue to evolve. And it's obvious that Gavin's continuing to evolve. He's continuing to learn. I remember when I was a strength coach, I felt like I was buying a different textbook every week. I was buying a different author every week. I wanted to see what else was out there so it could challenge my current idea, because straight out of college, basically, however you trained in college, you think that is the way, right? That is the one way to train. And then as you learn more, it starts to change the way you think. The tough part as a guy who gains knowledge, though, is writing your own program, and you get ADHD with it. Because you know so much, you try to do everything, so you end up tweaking your program on a weekly basis, which is a huge pain. But at the end of the day, the master of everything is progression and sticking to something so that you can progress rather than constantly changing. You never know you can't evolve that way. So as a player now, having the appreciation for injury prevention, which I always think is the most important thing. As I tell guys, as an athlete, we're not training for aesthetics. If you are in really good shape, you're going to look good, so don't worry about that. But as an athlete, we can't just focus on the mirror, because we have to go out there and compete at a high level and stay injury free. So how is your training now in the off season different than maybe before you went through the hernia surgery and all that stuff?
Yeah, I think I just put less pressure on myself to be overly concerned with like the numbers of weights I'm putting up. I think, again, like I understand the longer time horizon, from the end of the season and what I'm preparing my body for. I'm also, honestly, there's a lot of times where if I know I'm not doing the exercise right, or I'm like struggling on the last 4 or 5 reps out of 10 instead of the last 1 or 2, like I'm a lot more okay with lowering the weight 5 pounds, 10 pounds, going to a lighter band, just because I know that like struggling through something and barely doing it right versus getting the most out of the exercise at a lighter weight, that's actually going to have a more positive effect. And I think it's going to actually activate the muscles that you need to during that exercise. So that's been something that I think have just constantly, changed versus my earlier days. I think it's also a little easier where I think back to college and like the weight room, and like the numbers are posted outside the locker room, and you want to be like on Big Bench Friday, you want to be like at the the top couple racks. And I was probably always like in the middle. Like I made some nice gains, but I think like that does give you, from a competitive standpoint, this external pressure to do that. And you don't want to limit yourself, but I think also like there is this balance of just making sure you're doing things the right way. So I think, that's something that I think has been a good shift for me, in terms of like, hey, like, if my bench max is, 20, 30 pounds lighter than it was in college, like at the end of the day, like that's not going to mean I'm not going to go out and perform at a high level.
I agree with you. And I think that, like you said, if I'm doing bench, what is this doing for me on the field? Like, how is this exactly correlating? Or is this just my own ego wanting to do more than my roommate on bench? I remember when I was at Penn State, I desperately wanted to put on size because I was just a meathead. Like, I just wanted to be bigger. And I remember our strength coach, Brad Pantal, he would weigh us every time we came in, and that was my obsession, was getting bigger and stronger while I was at Penn State. But the attackman down there who needs to be shifty and catch the ball in the crease and score doesn't care at all about being bigger and stronger. I think when I was a strength coach at Penn State for men's women's basketball, I remember the hardest thing we had to do was try to explain to basketball players why putting on muscle or strength training in general was important for them. And for them, they were like, well, how is this going to make me shoot better? And we were like, well, you doing squats to failure is not going to help you shoot better necessarily. Yeah, it will give you more boost on your jump shot naturally, but in the fourth quarter, you being able to keep your legs underneath you and make your jump shot, that's where the strength training comes in. So I think understanding your why is so important for an athlete. So you, as a professional attackman right now, okay, you have a training that you're getting ready for the season. What would you recommend to any younger players right now that say, look, I want to be a wing or dodging attackman, and these are like 3 or 4 exercises or routines that I would definitely recommend?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think one thing that I'm recognizing too, that it continues to be important, is, I think a lot of guys are going to hit like squats. I think a lot of guys have, people have different opinions on, doing, I was talking to one of my guys the other day, like, they don't do back squats, they do front squats. I guess they don't want to load the bar on the back, fine. I guess people have different thoughts on that. Deadlift. I think some of those, main exercises for the quads, the hamstrings, I think are key. One thing that I learned a lot through some of my rehab even was the importance of the single leg exercises. So I think, single leg lunge type stuff, whether it's forward lunges, side lunges, single leg step ups. I think incorporating that stuff consistently into your weekly lower body is huge, especially like when you want to work on your dodging and explosiveness. Some stuff that I've been, I think Courtney's been implementing into our workouts, and I also, kind of picked up from, some trainers on Instagram and just seeing it more, is ankle stability. And so, doing like, I was doing some things with like what's called a floating heel. So, I was doing it's like a single leg RDL, okay, on a 45-pound, like you put the 45-pound plate on the floor, and then you put your toes on the edge of that plate. So the floating heel is that your heel is up and elevated. So just the balls of your feet. And so it was, honestly, I think I was doing it body weight to start, just doing like 3 sets of 6 on a single leg RDL, trying to keep that heel elevated. And what I was noticing is like my heel was collapsing a lot. And so that right there is like a balance and a stability in the ankle and like the balls of your feet, that even like when I was talking to Jules about some dodging stuff, like if your ankles aren't like stable and stiff, like when you're getting in and out of cuts, like you're going to leak a lot of your athleticism and the strength you're building in your legs. So like, that's been something to me that like, it's not this macho exercise that I'm doing, but over a month, like from August to now, like I've seen a huge jump in like my ankle stability with just some simple exercises. And I'm like, man, like my quads and hamstrings, like they could be the same, but already I know I'm going to be a better athlete because I have that balance and I can get lower into cuts and I can explode out. So that's something that I would really recommend to guys right now. Like, in addition to the single leg stuff where you can start to work on being on the balls of your feet and elevating your heel for that ankle stability, I think could be really big for an offensive player.
Yeah, I think you have two choices. Your joints can either generate power, or they could be a huge they could be a huge weakness for you. And you're right, like people who don't know how to understand the difference between strength and stability, I think she's doing a great job of getting you going with that. That's going to make a massive difference, not just from injury prevention, but like you said, you're already feeling that slight boost. It's like trying to run around with your shoes untied. You're gonna, if you have a good stable heel, you can actually play basketball, for instance. If you have your shoes kind of sliding in and out of your shoes because they're not tied, then you have a big issue. So I think that's actually really good advice for any athlete. Tell me about, like, linear speed obviously is important, but tell me about how you specifically worry about your lateral quickness in training.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great, a great question. I think even right now, stuff that like we've worked on is it's not like overly crazy in terms of like reps, but I think it's been just a lot of, basic movements around like, getting in and out of cuts, thinking about like when, again, changing direction, like just a little bit in terms of, where that body weight is, and kind of like, attacking the ground and then getting out. But that's where, even on like a simple, like up and back, for example, like down, like whether it's sprints or things like that down and back, like that's where like that ankle stability stuff also starts to come back into play, because like you can hit the ground and like when you go to change, as your heel is like collapsing, and then you have to push back again on the balls of your feet, like that's like an example of like your body might not be fully balanced or like starting to shift back in the direction you're trying to go, as well as just being able to get out quicker. So I think that's been something that has been like important to us. The other thing too, like another like lateral type of thing we've been doing is just simple. Greg, what's the thing where you have like the bar coming out of like the little like
Landmine.
Landmine? Yeah. So just like kind of like some lateral landmine squats, going in one side, coming up, going back to other. I think mixing some of that basic stuff into, supplementing more of like the linear, like the regular squats, like that's just been some simple stuff that we've been doing. And kind of back to even what you said about the consistency, like I'll come in like constantly reading things and looking at things, and I'm like bringing stuff up to Courtney, and then he's just, he's got the workouts planned, and it's just like, hey, it's just some of the basics, like, and just doing some of the basic stuff really well, maybe a couple twists here and there. But I think that the consistency piece is something that, again, like, the young kids, I think, need to continue to just understand, like a couple times a week, over several weeks, like you're going to see, some of those gains. If you're in one time a week and, or you're every other couple weeks, like it's really easy to, I think, get out of that routine. And that's even something for me, like I'm, from pretty much December on through May, I'm going to be spending a lot more of my time now in Baltimore, just because like I want to be in the gym with him, getting that 3 or 4 times a week versus continuing to, travel and do training and coaching. So, it's just interesting to see that, but I think that's where the consistency comes into play.
No, you're absolutely right. Consistency is king. I think that might actually be String King's tagline. The Funny thing about it, like I get questions all the time, like, oh, Beast, how'd you get so big? How'd you get so, your, shoulders, whatever, traps? They don't want to hear the answer. The answer is over 20 years of training 5 to 6 days a week, man, and eating. At one point in my life for 4 years, I was eating 10,000 calories a day. Like, you don't want to hear that. You want to hear, here's a program, bro. See you in the summer when you have huge traps. Like, people don't want to hear that, and it doesn't matter if you go to the right people. We're all going to tell you the exact same thing. That just like your ability, like where you are right now, you didn't play lacrosse like that the first week you picked up a lacrosse stick. And you didn't do it the second week either. You didn't do it the third week. You did it years later when you built on top of it with successful training. So I actually want to make that segue to training now. First class lacrosse. Tell me about the evolution of first class lacrosse from the online training to now what you do with best in class, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, back in 2016, when I first got out of school, Ryan Brown and I started our RBDC shooting. And we were doing small group shooting, some private training, stuff like that. In 2018, when I went out to USC, that's when I started, pretty much the same thing, but first class lacrosse, and also wanted to start picking up an emphasis on online training, getting drills filmed, getting our workouts together. And, COVID hit early 2020. We were fortunate to be ahead of that curve of, just online drills and how can you work from home. All of a sudden, a lot of kids were put in situations where they didn't have their coaches telling them what to do every day. How do I get better? And then, as first class lacrosse is built, we've brought on Matt McMahon, Matt Dunn on the defensive side, Christian Cuccinello and Jules Hennenberg, helping with offensive training and footwork. And then, I saw some different showcase opportunities pop up during COVID, and we weren't involved in those, but it just kept making me think. And then I remember, like, end of that summer, I was like, man, you know what? Like, I think we can do something that is showcase related, but it speaks to our strengths, what we deliver value in. And that's when I reached out to you and Goalie Smith. And I think we really created, one of the first events that has a true focus on positional training into small-sided drills, feedback, during those drills that, honestly, like when you have big events and you have coaches running stations, if coach is running the station, they're not really giving that much feedback during that. You know what I mean? So we tried to really staff it in a way where they could get that feedback, very much on the spot, which is what they told us at the end of the summer, which is one of the positives. And then still mix in the showcase element, a couple games each day, a little shorter. I don't think a full 1 hour game in the summer when it's blazing hot. I don't know that 3 or 4 of those is even really the best way to showcase being your best self as a lacrosse player. So I think that has a lot of work to do anyway. So that's kind of where we landed with best in class. We had 3 events. We had 2 different 2023 events. Our first 24 event, we're bringing a ton of players back for the 24s next summer, and then 25s, 26s. We've got committed players. We've got 60 guys coming this December. I think over 35 schools now are represented, which is awesome. And then we're in the process right now of launching our first women's event next June for the 2024s. So that's kind of where we landed. And really, I think it was just a response to what we were seeing in the market. A ton of kids playing a ton of games in the summer. Everyone always says, oh, like old school, like positional camps and different things. Like we got to get back to that. And I think you do and you don't. I think like you do, like people want more teaching and want more instruction, but they also still need to play games too. You can't just be all pure positional work and technique work and then have no game sense. So I think having this as a combination and then just trying to really, I think, deliver a lot of important feedback to help these guys and girls get better and grow is kind of where we're at. And so that's really everything that we're doing. We're doing a lot of weekly training right now, as I focus more back on the East Coast. And then, we've been having a lot of kids still continue to send film, watch game film online, and they're diving in. They're mindful. They're trying to get better. They want the feedback, and it's been exciting.
I can say, as an athlete, I've said for years, even as a professional athlete who was 37 years old, well, 35 when I played with the Redwoods in my final game, I always said players want to be coached. And it doesn't matter if I am a professional face-off coach. I want to be coached. I want to be told, I want to be part of a community. I want to be part of a coaching staff that cares and wants to look out for me and get my back, make me better. I can tell you right now, because I was lucky enough to be part of the staff for your Best in Class, it was the perfect combination of everything. We got there, we had the best players in their grades. They all showed up, they all wanted to be coached. There were no guys there that were rolling their eyes, there were no guys there that weren't listening. They loved when you gave them advice. They stared you right in the eyes, they nodded, and they did it. They literally took exactly what you said, and they got better. Which was incredibly refreshing, because I don't think we give kids enough credit sometimes. I think we're so used to maybe the same kids we train every week, and we kind of almost become like white noise to them, like their parents. It was refreshing to meet new kids and have them listen at that high caliber of talent. They were in the drills, they worked so hard, and they got an individual attention. And I think the unique thing about Best in Class is it wasn't like, hey, these kids are going to be put on teams and we're going to roll balls out and they're going to play and we're going to give them some cool swag. Oh, by the way, let's add some coaches to add to the value of this event. No, it was built around these coaches coaching. The added value was, oh, by the way, we're also going to play games. So it was very cool how you flipped the pyramid, and you said training is going to be the core of this, and we're going to play games to show coaches that are watching that you have the ability to take information and then apply it immediately to a game. And the games were great because of that. The kids were dialed in. They understood exactly what they wanted from the coaches that were on the sidelines. I'm still impressed by this, you had a who's who on the sideline of college coaches. Literally the top 25 poll was on the sideline. And there were kids that I coached from FOA that punched their ticket that weekend. And it was really cool to watch. And I think, look, the lacrosse world is small. Copycats are going to copycat, and it's going to be, this is going to probably be the new kind of standard that people are going to try to mimic moving forward from a financial standpoint. But at the end of the day, what you brought is unique. You brought the who's who. You had Goalie Smith there. Your first-class caliber group of guys is incredible. Justin Simon was there, who also puts on the prep showcase. There was a who's who on that staff, so it was really awesome to watch. I would be interested to see from a training component, have you thought about possibly bringing in a speed and agility or strength coach to either talk to the kids and parents or add it to the event while you're there?
We did for our 2024 event, we added a parent panel, which you were a part of. We got incredible feedback on that. We'll definitely be doing that again because I think the guidance and advice is key. Felt a lot of parents were really struggling with the balance of a lot of the different events. I think coming out of COVID too, people just didn't know what was enough. So I think our goal too is, not only are we providing this opportunity to train and stuff, but we also want our families to know that we're here to be a resource for them. We're here to be this unbiased source of how to get better, how to also make good decisions, take into account like how your kid is feeling, what they need for their bodies. Some kids need more on the physical therapy side. Some kids need to get faster. Some kids need to get stronger. And hopefully, again, you can, all of us can be a resource to push them in those directions, to maybe a certain strength coach or to maybe a certain, guy who's focused on mobility and PT. So that's definitely something that we're going to be, considering adding, and we've got some stuff in line, which we'll talk about more offline, but definitely excited to see how that grows. And I think the other thing, that we need to keep in mind too when doing all this stuff is, I just finished up a book called Grit by Angela Duckworth. And, she's talking about grit as this idea of passion and persistence, or passion and perseverance, right? And so it's that the perseverance, persistence piece speaks to the consistency. It speaks to doing something over and over again. The passion piece I thought was really interesting, because a lot of times, you and I, like, it can be easy to forget how passionate we are, right? But our passion has grown over years, and it didn't necessarily start as a passion. It started as an interest, right? Your interest in strength and conditioning, your interest in face-offs, my interest in shooting, offense, playing lacrosse. So sometimes too, like with these middle school guys and these high school guys, they might have several interests, on field, off field, multiple different sports. And just because it might not be a passion yet, doesn't mean it's not going to become one. And I think it's our job to foster that passion. But I also think too, like, I'm also at the point now a little bit with my training where, I'm trying to create environments that make these things stuff that guys want to do more. But I also can't always just beat over the head with them. Hey, like, you got to do this, you got to do that, because at the end of the day, like, they don't necessarily have to. They could be putting this time and effort into something else. And, I'm there really too to help them just get better as people, So I think, like, how can we keep stoking that interest into a passion? But back to your point about, like, here's your strength program, like, this is how you get big traps, like, show up and do it or don't. Like, that's kind of where I'm at a little bit. Like, you're either going to put in the work to something that you're really interested in and it might become a passion, or you're not going to do it and you're going to have different interests and you're going to spread your time in different ways. And that's okay too. But the ones who end up deciding that this is their passion, this is something that they're really interested in, when they take the resources available and then apply it, and then they're consistently showing up, that's when you, like, really start to make, I think, meaningful differences in your game off the field. So I just think that's, like, an important piece to all this too, is, like, the interest level. And then, okay, when they make some of those decisions for themselves, how can we provide the proper resources to help them make that next step?
No, those are great points. I'm definitely going to pick up that book and read it, because I think one of the things I struggled with the most is, in my career, I think kids confuse some things. I think they confuse that, like, I would have any ulterior motive, right? Like, I tell kids, like, look behind me. Everything went well. My career's over, right? I got what I wanted way more than I ever thought I would dream of in having a career that I had. I got very lucky and fortunate. I had a lot of people that helped me reach where I wanted to. I experienced reaching your absolute potential in something. I know for a fact that I was as good as I could ever have been at facing off in lacrosse. Knowing that is such an incredible feeling that I just assumed as a coach that every kid would want to feel that. And I think I got frustrated early as a face-off coach because I wanted every kid that came through the door to get to experience that. And even though I meant well, I have to understand that not every kid wants that. Some kids want to start for their JV team. Some kids want to be good enough to go to college. Some kids want to just be with their friends at draw day. And I have to appreciate that. And it's made me mature as a person being a coach. And I say this all the time, being a coach really prepared me for being a father, in that, a lot of things, you don't want the same things that necessarily every kid wants. But your ability to recognize that is what makes you a top-end coach. It can also help you be a top-end parent in recognizing what the difference is, like you said, between an interest and a passion. Every kid who comes through my door is interested in face-offs. Very few of them have a passion that they want to be as good as they can humanly be. And my goal is to recognize that and be able to foster every single kid and know exactly how I need to foster each kid who comes through the door. And you're experiencing that right now with first class.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think, again, that point about the individuals, like, some of the best advice I got from the women's soccer coach at USC when I started working with the women 3 years ago is, he was like, just treat every athlete like an individual, right? And I think I've continued, I felt like I received that when I was at Duke. I felt like I really received that from a lot of my coaches growing up. And my parents always say that I was very fortunate with the types of coaches that I had. And so I think that's something that I really try to take into account, with a lot of players. And that's where I, like, to the same thing, like I want a lot of the same for my guys, like, and girls. Like I want them to experience playing on a great team, winning at a high level, putting their minds to something and seeing it pay off. But I'm trying, I try harder and harder to, not take it personally that like, hey, it doesn't mean that like they don't want my coaching or appreciate it, but they just might have a lot of different other stuff, going on. And I think like it's also a cool kind of way to shift the paradigm as a coach to where like you are in a way too, you're vying for a lot of kids' attention from different activities. How can you do what you do in a way that makes them want more? And I find too, like even in school, right, like you kind of get beat over the head with like doing this, doing that, you got to read this, and everything's like you got to do it, right? But like coaches, tweet all the time, like how do you shift from I have to I get to, like one of those kind of mindsets. And so I think that's something too where, hey, like sometimes some parents are signing kids up for stuff and it's coming more from them than it's from the kid. Sometimes the kid really wants it. It's really refreshing when you get the kid who asks you a ton of questions and he wants to be there, and it's like this is his everything. Then you got some kids who aren't like that, but like that's a cool opportunity to then like approach that kid and build a relationship in a different way. And they might be like that, but they might be the most talented one in the group, and it's kind of like your job to help them realize that. And then at the end of the day, like if they choose not to pursue it, like they might be even better in another sport.
Yeah.
Like I've
Definitely.
seen some 2 and 3 sport athletes that, look at some of these guys choosing football over lacrosse and vice versa. And look at Pat Spencer, like everyone in lacrosse wants Pat Spencer to play lacrosse, but he freaking loves basketball,
Yeah,
and like
we're cheering just as hard for him to be great at basketball now.
yeah. And like, so it's like, you take it back and like, you can't fault these kids for that. So I think it's like one of those where it's like, hey, like I'm here for you if you need me. I've got drills for you. I've got things to look at. I've got an online platform, like whatever. But at the end of the day, if you don't choose to use that, like that's their decision. But I'm just here to support them along the way, and I think it's been exciting too, to like, when, I get to meet all these different players, whether it's one session or multiple sessions, like, they come, build somewhat of a relationship, and then like I can like be in their corner, and like just support them as much as they want to use it, and I'm starting to see like, I got some guys graduating college soon and they're going to get into the working world. Some might try to keep playing lacrosse, and hey, at the end of the day, it's cool to see it all come full circle.
Yeah, it's very gratifying. I can say now with Face Off Academy, we only hire guys that we've coached. And it's very cool to wake up in the morning and have a group chat of staff that's 75% guys that I coached when they were in high school and college. The fact that I get to work with Peyton Smith or Mike Sisselberger or et cetera now is super cool. But I want to thank you, Deemer, because this has been an awesome discussion. You have given us a lot of good insight and a lot of knowledge that I think people can really get from you. Can you just give us your social handle and website where people can find you after this conversation?
Yeah, our social handle is at First Class Lacrosse, FIRST. Our website is the number 1 stclasslax.com. So firstclasslax.com. That has all of our information for upcoming events. We've just put out our second edition of a newsletter. So if you want to subscribe to that and just get updates on what we're up to, you can sign up for our online platform up there. So a lot of good stuff, coming. We're excited for, 2022, but winding down the calendar year here. So it's been an exciting couple of years, and just excited to keep, finding our place within the lacrosse world, and keep helping athletes and coaches that want our help.
That's awesome. I want to thank Deemer for making it official today. For the Premier subscribers, we're going to be back so that we can have the post game. We'll be talking a little bit more about lacrosse, training, and our love-hate relationship with the sport in general. So thanks a lot for making it official, Deemer, and I'll see you guys next time.